I'm actually going to start stretching my own imagination and perhaps stretching yours about how we think about diversity and inclusion. I want to start thinking about where we're going and how we can move forward a little bit with this subject versus where we've been and how it happens. When Shane called me and asked if I would be willing to share a few words on this subject, I said, well, Shane, I'm normally in my circle of diversity and inclusion friends, I'm a little bit more of the controversial one. I'm the one that's a little bit more challenging to us as as a function or as a group, because my belief is it's like, man, we've been working on this thing for like 40 years and we're really not happy with where we're at 40 years later. And I keep thinking, well, that means, man, either we're not doing something right or we need to do something different. And that's where I'm coming from this subject about, well, how do we just try to do something different with inclusion and diversity? Maybe we can just think about it from a different perspective. We might get slightly different results. You've heard it before, right? Insanity is, to continue to do the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. The subject of diversity and inclusion is such a personal one that people are almost embarrassed to say, no, I don't really want to do that. Right? So they go along with that same thing over and over again when we really need to be thinking about this differently. And I had the privilege of working with growth-based companies. And I think that's important that you understand where I'm going with the rest of this conversation, that growth-based companies actually have a slightly different attitude than those companies who are not interested in growing as much or as fast. So if you're a growth-based company, you're concerned about these two trends. One is, what is the population, the consumer demographics of your potential consumer? The other is, what are the buying power, the financial power of those two consumers? And you see on the left and the right, one depicts, on the left, you get to see the demographics, and on the right, you get to see a buying power. And what's really important for these three largest ethnic groups that we have in the U.S. is that you're able to see the percentage of change in buying power from one group for the next. So I'm talking to a marketing team and they say, Tony, what we really want to do is we really want to figure out how we reach out to the fastest growing ethnic minority population in the U.S., which is the Hispanic Latino culture. And I said, excellent. And you know what? They contribute $1.4 trillion into the marketplace. That's absolutely a good place to start. And so all of these companies have started deriving these initiatives and start saying, how do we touch that consumer, and how can we get closer, and how can we be friendly with this group? And Tony, your diversity, you should be helping us think about that. And what I wanted to help them think about is, yeah, that's an excellent focus. But did you notice that there are a couple other groups out there too? One contributed $1.2 trillion into the marketplace, or $700 billion in the marketplace. If you take all of your efforts and you focus towards one particular group, you're actually leaving a lot more on the table, if you will. In a growth-based company, that's the wrong mindset to have. But in a company that is focused and thinks about diversity and inclusion from a narrow perspective, that's the direction we time to go in. So we have to start challenging that. This is what we know that we can achieve. Those organizations that practice diversity and inclusion outperform their peers on the S&P marketplace by about 26%, according to Diversity Inc.'s top 50 companies for diversity. Fascinating, right? You look at the Center for Talent Innovation, and did a study of about 600 or 700 companies, and they said, well, you know what? Those companies that actually practice inclusion well, they're 45% more likely to grow in their current market, 70% more likely to capture new market growth. And those companies that practice diversity and inclusion well, they're able to look at getting the 2.3 times utilization of their mind share of their employees versus not. Compelling argument or compelling reasons for us to think about diversity and inclusion, and one in which I'm like, all right, this is good stuff, but what does it mean to do it well? That's actually the critical question. Everyone talks about this stuff, but what does it mean to do it well? Somewhere out there has to be a factor that we can actually just look at and say, that's it. Capturing that, getting more of this can actually start to move us to that direction. And this is what I'm trying to uncover. Someone talked about effectiveness in teams, and I was sharing the story a little bit earlier, and I like to tell the story backwards. And this tries to capture the difference between a multicultural team and then or a single culture team. And as you can see on the far left, the multicultural team has a degree of effectiveness. When they get to the middle, you see a single cultural group. So what this is telling us is that a homogeneous group actually outperforms a diverse group. That's exactly what this chart is telling us so far, right? But when you get to the other side, on the right side of the curve, what you see is that these cross-cultural groups that are managed well actually outperform a homogeneous group and or a diverse group. And this talks and speaks to something that I think is important, because we talk about diversity a lot, but when I try to remember, and if you do this wrong, leaders will just say, go out and get me some people and bring them in here and let's make sure they're the right people, but you actually have to do something else. What we've discovered is that diversity doesn't get the benefits you want unless you manage it well. Diversity doesn't work without inclusion. Inclusion becomes an increasingly important factor of how we get the benefits of what we say a diverse team will bring once we start to have inclusion. And so if we keep pushing this and pushing this and pushing this, and we start thinking about, man, what are those behaviors we need to have in order to practice inclusion? Well, I'm playing with 3 of them right now, and I'd like to share them with you. And perhaps you've seen these work or take place inside of your organization, and about a year from now, I'd love to come back and tell you how it's working inside of our organization. One is that we need to move from awareness of differences to the utilization of differences to drive innovation and growth. In a growth-based company, it is really, really important that we get to the point about how we're utilizing talent. I don't want to know how you feel. I want to know what you're doing to drive business results. That's a rough thing for me to have to say as a diversity and inclusion practitioner. I hope none of my colleagues are here. Because when I talk to my business leaders, I'm telling them that, well, but when people feel good, they're going to give you the business results. And then they're looking at me, they're saying, yeah, but right now I really care about these business results. Can we talk about when people feel good after I talk about these business results? And so now I'm at the point where I'm saying, hey, you just don't get the growth. If you want to grow your company, then you need to practice these skills. Every company is concerned about market success. We're concerned about it from a growth perspective. And the process by this is that you have to have effective products and services times great ideas and innovation. You need that, right? Without it, you're not going to get any market success. What I'm arguing is that if you multiply this times inclusion, what you're going to see is what they were talking about. 26% in terms of outperforming their peers on the S&P market. There's a differentiator there that this is talking about diversity and inclusion and how we use this as a multiplier to get higher levels of performance. Now, as my time runs out, I wanted to show you just a couple of other things, how the results of a few multipliers who've been able to impact the marketplace. And I'm not even using my own company at this point in time. What I'm showing you right now is products and services that were created for consumers that were internally driven by having a diverse and inclusive speak-up culture. These things were not created from the outside, created from the inside. And once you start to see what's the process of that, there's a story behind each one in terms of what they were able to do on their sales over a 12-month, year-over-year period. Their comps in just about every category had a positive increase. And all they had to do is turn around and tap the talent that they have right in front of them. This whole thing about multiplier and inclusion and what's important and what's valuable, there are a lot of different things that I still have yet to prove with all different types of data points. But what I can say is if you think about it, how do multipliers impact your people, your products and services, your brand, and your marketplace? And that if you practice these behaviors of moving from awareness to utilization of differences, to understanding the unconscious mindsets or biases that you have as a leader, and you ask those leaders to drive cultures that promote inclusion, that are speak up so you don't have what you see, this is what you can expect to see. Some profits, market growth, market capitalization, those things that all of my top level executives care about a lot more than some of the other things that I have to talk to them about. So with that, I'm out of time. Thank you so much. Enjoy your coffee. Appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you for coming.